Now that in NIE, we have this opportunity because we are creating spaces like the Science of Learning Lab here, the IoT over there, and then the Movement Lab, and also other TR206, for example. So these different spaces simulate the affordance structures of certain schools, okay, where teachers investigate with kids on students, on whatever disciplinary aspects or subject area aspects, okay? So we are simulating it. And NIE becomes, hopefully, possibly, an experimental research design context through which these different types of schools can facilitate the kinds of student learning processes relative to NIE faculty mentoring these students. Just like Kenneth's interesting work that he's currently doing. So one more thing, I'm very happy to know that our two SGI boys are very willing to work with, say, other students from other schools. So if they can build a community around inquiring about their own learning through census, that's FSBB in spirit. All I can say is that we need teacher leadership, all right? And teacher leadership, not just in terms of the kinds of typical traditional school leadership, administrative kind of leadership. You need instructional, curricular, professional culture, teacher culture kind of leadership. And I think NIE's role is to help develop these teacher leaders. The science of learning in education can potentially find its way to teacher education or teacher learning practices and schools, right? How does this pathway occur?
In your vision, it's not necessarily subject-based affinity groups, but interest-based affinity groups, right? Mm-hmm. And where I'm going with this is that interests cut across subjects, and a proper rich project would bring in strengths from the different subjects.
Interesting point. Okay, you made a very interesting point.
Is how do we facilitate this kind of future of learning, right? Here you talk about science of learning by looking at the researchers investigating both our cognitive, social, emotional, different dimensions and how this learning can be facilitated, including what Kenneth earlier on talking about. How do we even break the ice and getting people to feel comfortable working together?
Yeah. So my first thought around all these very important but complicated issues as far as scaling and translation and sustainability is concerned is to begin with a programmatic R&D project. Because we all know in our historical past that if we get a funded proposal and then have partners with certain schools and experimentally conduct our R&D in NIE with these students and teachers, we could potentially simulate a setting in which this can work first. So that's why we show that this model can potentially work. Once we get a model with evidence-based data to support that it works, especially for low progress students, and as they work with students who are not so low progress, because this is how across schools full subject-based learning can occur, and it's very Piketskian, all right? And then we use science of learning data to prove that these kids, whether cognitively or social emotionally or intellectually, is in having learning gains. If we can show that it works, and then in the meantime involve our partners from the CTLEs into our R&D project, and then we find a way, a mechanism, we work within NIE's leverages. So for example, we know that if we work with our to-be beginning teachers who are going out in schools, and somehow if we are able to, say, align it with our to-be beginning teachers once they graduate, we could then gradually move this model to work with these NIE graduates to be able to situate it in the schools.